Prime Minister is trying to avert a damaging rebellion by right-wing Tory MPs over his Rwanda plan. This is ahead of tonight's crunch vote.
Both the flagship scheme and arguably Sunak's premiership depend on the outcome of tonight's key vote.
And Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Tories of being in an indulgent vortex of infighting.
Yes, but he's also said that he does think that this bill will go through because of the government's majority, but we shall see.
Yes, well, let's speak now to our political editor, Christopher Hope. He's in Westminster with the chairman of the Conservative Party, Richard Holden. Chris.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Emily. With me now is Richard Holden, the chairman of the Tory party. Richard Holden, 4 years ago today, you were elected as a Red Wall Tory MP against the odds. What's gone wrong with the party?
Look, I think today we've got a really important thing to do, and that's to deliver the toughest possible legislation imaginable, tougher than anything any government's previously passed, to really help clamp down on illegal immigration and get that Rwanda scheme moving as quickly as possible. It removes all of those legal issues that have dogged us over the years when we've tried to ensure that people get deported from the UK. So I think this is a really strong plan. I hope that people get behind it. It's absolutely vital that they do, because the only other alternative is Keir Starmer's open door immigration policy. Keir Starmer thinks that any form of controls on immigration are racist, which is obvious nonsense, and we need to have a strong plan and back the Prime Minister tonight in order to deliver for the British people.
But your colleagues think that they can't back it. The 5 families of the Tory right are meeting at 5 o'clock today. They may well vote against it. What's your message to them?
I would just say this is the toughest possible package that has been brought forwards. Obviously, this is also a second reading vote today, so this is on the principle of it. Any Tory MP should be backing the principle of tougher immigration controls, which is exactly what's on the table today. There's obviously further detail, and as the government's made clear, if there's any tweaks that can be made to toughen it up further, then they're open to discussions on that. But we've got to be there really strong on the principle of tougher rules. And I think to my colleagues, I would just say to this, the other option is a Labour government who want open door immigration. Now, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see those controls that we've fought hard to put in place over the last few years removed. I want to see us making further progress and really clamping down. We've already seen boat arrivals down by 1/3 this year. We've seen hundreds of criminals arrested here in the UK, really taking this head on. We've got to go further, and we've got to take action now.
You mentioned our Labour government. Are you saying that if the government loses tonight, there'll be an election in the early spring?
What I'm saying tonight is I think any weakness from our party today will not help the cause, which is so important to voters up and down the country, including in constituencies like mine, including in marginal seats like Bury, right across the country. We've got to ensure that we are as tough as practically possible on these measures. That's what this bill does. That's what Lord Wolfson has said. That's what Lord Sumption has said, former Supreme Court Justice. We need to be there for the British people, delivering for them.
How confident are you of winning tonight? Will it be a tight vote?
Look, I just hope that all colleagues really think seriously about this. This is a second reading of a bill to have the toughest immigration controls this country has ever seen. Right? That's what's on the table tonight. Anybody who isn't backing that has got to really have a good look in the mirror today. I want to see everybody supporting this. Everybody is supporting the Prime Minister, who's bringing forward the toughest possible legislation in this space.
And MPs who vote against will lose the whip?
Look, whipping matters are a matter for the Chief Whip. I'm there to help support colleagues up and down the country and deliver as many Conservative MPs as possible at the next general election. Voting for this measure tonight will help me do that. I want all colleagues to be with us in the division lobbies wherever possible, because this is such an important piece of legislation, especially when you contrast it to Keir Starmer's speech today. You know, won't even mention the £28 billion a year he's planning to borrow. Right? He's trying to hide from those issues. That would be an extra 5% on the basic rate of income tax for people, right? We need to be very clear. There is a real clear dividing line here. A Conservative Party that is committed to delivering for the British people on controlling illegal immigration. A Labour Party that wants open borders and tax hikes right across the board for the people of our country.
And just very finally, Richard Holden, odds on winning tonight, 50-50?
Look, I'm going to be out there doing as much as I can to convince colleagues that this is exactly the right thing to do. We need to be as hard as possible on immigration, because the other option is an open door, not just to unlimited migration, but to the Labour Party who would wreck our country.
Richard Holden, thank you for joining us on GB News. Yeah, and you heard there, Tom and Emily, Richard Holden, the chairman of the Tory party, making clear they will look at amending it maybe in the spring just to get past tonight's vote. A key moment, almost existential, on the 4-year anniversary of that Tory landslide back in 2019. Back to you.
Well, Chris, what a poignant moment to end on then. 4 years ago today, when it looked so different, when the polls were so different, when the political makeup of the country felt so different. Christopher Hope there in Westminster.
Yes, absolutely. Strong stuff from Richard Holden there, the chairman of the Conservative Party, insisting that every single Conservative MP must back the government when it comes to this
and
bill.
Of course
but will they?
He was framing it in electoral terms as well. I suppose that's the frame through which he views these things as chairman of the party, as the man responsible for the election campaign likely next year. But it is interesting that he started to bring forward this idea that if Tory MPs vote against it, they are likely to lose seats at the next election, which I suppose makes sense on the one hand in that disunited parties don't win elections. But on the other hand, if this bill passes and then fails in a way, perhaps it doesn't stop the votes in the way that things have been promised, then that's also an electoral issue.
Well, this is the conundrum for the Conservative Party, isn't it? Because the infighting and the different groups meeting and deciding what they think about this flagship bill doesn't look good to the electorate. But then if the bill doesn't actually work, and if there are these loopholes that the Star Chamber, which is those lawyers that are working on behalf of these right-wing groups of the Tory party, if they're right and it doesn't work and it isn't the toughest immigration rules we've ever seen, then, that's also could cost votes.
Well, both these things could be true. It could be true that it is both the toughest rules that we have ever seen, but there are still some loopholes. The word was incomplete that the Star Chamber referred to. Now, I suppose the big question is, can those quote-unquote loopholes be tightened up at committee stage in the spring? Or is it just fundamentally a problem with the absolute basis of this bill as it is written? Those are big questions, but it did seem that Richard Holden, talking to Christopher Hope there, was saying that actually the government is open to listening to what can be done at committee stage to perhaps tighten it up even further.
Well, that's interesting because, yes, this bill is not necessarily a finished product, and MPs will have the opportunity to try and amend it as it goes through all those different stages through the Commons, and then of course it goes to the Lords, and then we shall see if it passes and then what legal challenges come about after that. It's a long process to get legislation through Parliament.
Yes, as I think it should be. It's a weighty thing to legislate on behalf of people of a country. And it's one of the reasons, actually, I visited the Hungarian Parliament not that long ago. And they have, like the European Parliament, they have little buttons for MPs to vote. They press little buttons on their desks. And I think that this makes bad law. I think when legislators don't have to... In the UK, we have to physically walk through a voting lobby. You have to vote with your feet. You have to be present there, and it takes time. You're not just pressing a little button on a desk.
Also, it's a good thing because it encourages our politicians not to work from home.